Hey friends, it's your pal Mike Shea here from Sly Flourish. Today we are going to dig into the D&D 5th edition starter set, Heroes of the Borderlands. Wizards of the Coast sent me a preview copy, a review copy of the starter set. I got it last Thursday, or last Friday, which I think is like 3 days ago. And I have opened it up. I have dug into it. I have played a session of it. And we're going to talk about it all today on our show. This is a spotlight. This is a spotlight and probably a first impressions. It can take me and probably lots of people some time to truly absorb everything that is inside something like this. This is what I would consider to be a very important product for D&D. Maybe the most important product for D&D. This could be the entryway into role-playing games for lots and lots of people. So I think it is an important product to really understand. I think that it takes a while to understand it, particularly this one, more so than I would say Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is the original 5th edition starter set, or Dragon of Stormwreck Isle, which is the most recent one, or Dragon of Icespire Peak, which is it wasn't really, that was the Essentials kit, kind of a different product. All of them took me some time to really get my head around. And this one is even bigger. You can tell it's huge, right? This is a huge starter set. Definitely bigger, but also like more material to play through than those starter sets had. So I think it's going to take a little time. That is my qualifier to say what you're watching right now, what you're going to learn about is kind of mostly first impressions of it. I reserve my right to change my mind on some of this stuff, and I definitely want to spend more time with it. I want to run it. I'd love to run all the scenarios. And what I'd really like to do is say, and here are some tips that I have. And I do already have some tips for running your starter set based on what I have seen so far, based on what I've done, but it's very cool. So we're going to dive all into this today to talk about the starter set. So up front, is it good? Yes, it's very good. Is it a good deal? Holy cow, is it a good deal? So let's talk about the price point. Let's talk about the price point first. This is the most expensive starter set that I think Wizards of the Coast has put out maybe ever since Wizards of the Coast published it. Now, I'm not accounting for inflation, so I'm not exactly sure, and I don't exactly remember what the 3rd edition starter sets were like, but I'm pretty sure 4th edition onwards, the starter sets were generally thinner with fewer amounts of stuff and cost less. So the price point for this one is $50. That is high. It is a high price point for a starter set. However, what you get in here is definitely worth $50. When I had read things, I had heard about stuff, I had seen pictures of it, and when I opened it up, I was still really impressed with all of the stuff that it's got. It is packed solid. It's 6 pounds of stuff going on in this starter set. It's hurting my arm. I got a shoulder. I'm going to get a shoulder issue. Here's a picture of all of the stuff that it has. I spread it all out on the table. It has 8 full-size, like 2 foot by 3 foot poster maps, and then like 4 half-size poster maps. So just a ton of maps. Just the physical maps are a ton of them. And it has your full set of dice. It has 4 booklets. One booklet is the play guide. The play guide is I think it's about 35 pages. I'm going to open up my box here. So it's got a 32-page play guide. These are all the basic rules for the game. It doesn't include any character-specific stuff because all of that are on the character cards, which we will dive into and talk about. But it has all of the basic rules for the game, including a rules glossary. So it's kind of like the main rules section and the rules glossary section of the 2014 Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. So very handy. My wife and I played a one-on-one game with this where she played 2 characters. She used 2 of the character cards and I DM'd, and we regularly went and pulled this up to kind of see, like, what does it have to say about death saves? For example, and I learned something new that I didn't know about, which was the help action. So I didn't realize that the help action has changed since 2014 to 2024 D&D. For example, the new help action requires that the person who is helping someone has to be proficient in either the tool or skill that they are helping with. The person who is doing it does not need to be trained. But that actually is going to lower the amount, because typically, I believe the way it worked before is that anyone could aid anybody. Anybody could use the help action on anyone else to help them on a task, even if they were trained or not. Now you have to be trained in the skill that you were helping with. So that puts a limit on that. It also means that the person who is trained in it might instead aid somebody else who is not trained in it, which is a little weird, because you're like, hey, let's have the person who's not trained actually accomplish the thing while the help person is aiding them, because advantage may be better than a flat score that you might get. So that I thought was an interesting thing. The book includes a 4-page read me first guide. It's right up front when you open up the thing, that talks about exactly how to get started the game, what all materials are there, what you do if you're a GM, what you do if you're a player. I found it really good. It talks about your role. Are you going to make a character? Or are you going to be the dungeon master? And what do you do here? It has a description of your character card and talks about all the things you need for that. The character card has instructions on it for the things that you need, like here's the equipment that you need to pick up. Here are the spell cards that you need to pick up. Here's your starting gold. So that was really, that worked out very well. And the back kind of shows all of the different kinds of components that the box has. So yes, A, $50 is high for a starter set, but B, you absolutely know where that money went. Like, I think the only detriment of the $50 price is not in the value of the material you get. It's just, is that going to be a barrier for some people to kind of impulse buy it? There were points where the Lost Mine of Phandelver box set, the original box set, was like $7 on Amazon. Like, you could get it so cheap. I literally bought a box of them once. I bought like 12. Right? Because I was like, it's like $7. I'm going to buy 12 of them, and I'm going to put it in every like little corner library and every little gift exchange that I can put it into. Right? I'm not buying 12 $50 starter sets. Right? Like, I don't think that that's going to happen. But you get, like, when I opened it, I felt like it was like a Beetle and Grimm set. It had so much stuff in here, handouts that it's got, all the books separated out into different guides, the character tokens, the monster tokens, all of the cards, the treasure cards, all of the stuff that you get in this box set. I'll go back to this image here. All the stuff that you get in here makes it feel like a really high-end exclusive set. Like, it was, it really, like, it is more than $50 worth of value in this box. Like, they are almost certainly, I would not be surprised if Wizards, if the profit margin on this is really, really low and maybe non-existent, right? Maybe that this is a loss leader for them. So I think, even though it is a high price, $50, which is, a high price depends on your point of view, right? Like, for an RPG product, that's the cost of one core book. So that's not that crazy. But yeah, and Michael in chat says the Holmes Basic set, if accounted for inflation, was $10 in 1979, which would be $54 today. So, when you include inflation, maybe that's not such an outrageous thing. And I tell you, this has way more than the Holmes set did. Absolutely. So it is packed full of stuff. So one of the questions I had is like, where are we going to see this thing sold? Again, getting into the idea that this is a really important product. Where are we going to see it? So what I have heard, and it'll only be confirmed when we see it there. I have heard that Wizards of the Coast is working to get this into big box stores like your Walmarts or your Targets. Not sure which one, and I don't know if it's 100% that it's going to be in there, but I think the real advantage of a box set like this is that you can get it into big box stores where you cannot typically sell physical books and get this kind of product, and thus RPGs, out into more people so that they can pick it up. So I'm excited to hear and see this thing more in the wild in places that us RPG people don't just go to. That's why I think, like, I have talked about Mike's Little Candles on the kind of things that I am eager to see Wizards of the Coast do to help support the whole hobby, and a good, solid, physical starter set that can bring people into the hobby, show them what RPGs are like, and expose them to kind of the rest of what this awesome hobby has is critical. And so I actually think that this might be, and I don't know if I'm being too pedantic here, could be the most important role-playing game product published in a long time, right? Like, I whether or not it succeeds at it, I hope it does. And so far I have not seen anything that tells me it won't. The price point being the only one where it's like, that's kind of expensive for a product, for people to just dump it on a product. But it's not that outrageous when you consider board games and anything like that. So I don't know if it's that high. Could be the most important product to bring new people into our hobby. So I think that could be why this is an important product. So it really felt, I had heard that they were kind of steering towards board game kind of people. Other than the character cards, though, the rest of it felt like a pretty straightforward RPG product. The battle maps felt like battle maps. You're moving tokens around. The dice, of course, are the standard dice. There's a lot of good accessories in here, but it didn't change how the game ran. It didn't change, it still was a role-playing game, even though it's kind of aiming towards board game kind of stuff, and even though you have the character cards with it, I still didn't feel like this is more of a board game than it is a role-playing game. It is very much a role-playing game, and it felt like a premium D&D role-playing product to me. I mentioned that it has tons of poster maps in it. Like that surprised me. When I had originally seen I'll show an example of one of the poster maps. When I had originally seen the kind of initial shots of the product, I kind of thought that we would see a lot of smaller maps, like maps that were maybe like 18 by 24 or even like 1-page or 2-page fold-out maps. And instead, what I was not expecting to see was 4 double-sided full poster maps. So 8 poster-sized maps for all of these different locations. And then 4 maps, I think at least 4, maybe more, maps that are half-sized poster maps, and all of them are showing 5-foot square locations of all of the major locations that are inside all of the scenarios of the adventure. So it really has tons and tons of stuff, but the maps are really good. It also has regional maps. Here's an example of the Caves of Chaos map that it's got, and it has regional maps for the 3 main regions, and the game focuses on 3 main regions. The Keep of the Borderlands itself, which is a settlement where you're mostly doing NPC interaction and going around from storefronts and town and different sort of town places. The Wilderness, which is a larger overarching exploration, overland exploration, and the Caves of Chaos, which has all of these different caves that are kind of going on in here. Each of those has regional maps that you can put in front of the players so they can see them and they can choose where they're going. Let's look at character cards. So the character cards kind of take over for the character sheet. This is probably where the starter set is just radically different from the rest of the way that you would run a D&D game, because it doesn't look anything like the normal character sheet, which gets into a point that I'm going to make a little later, which is, does this build a different expectation for what a role-playing game is like than when you try to graduate from the starter set and into a full RPG, which is a big question. But in any case, the design of it is really cool. Very fast to play. Very quickly, you do have the ability to kind of custom build a character. So unlike having just a flat pre-gen, you actually have a class card, and then you can put a species on it and a background on it and equipment on it and spells on it and everything to kind of build out your character. A major difference. So there's a couple of really interesting things here that I want to point out. One is, you will quickly notice there are no ability scores. And there are no ability scores on the monster cards either. That was a little surprising to me. Not truly surprising, because nobody would know what they were if you don't explain them anywhere else. So there are no ability scores. There are only ability bonuses. And it explains right there on the sheet. It shows you which skills are tied to which abilities and what your ability is on there. I don't think there's anything that describes your proficiency either, which means the only way you know what skills you are trained in is to see, and this matters because it matters with the help action, right? If I'm going to use the help action, I need to do it on one that I'm proficient with. But the sheet does not tell you are proficient with a skill. Instead, you have to look at it and say, I am the ones where I have a bonus that is higher than my base attribute. Those are the ones I'm trained in. So there's a way to figure it out. But it isn't kind of inherent on the sheet, which means that there are some rules that are kind of weird. Halcyon Zeta says, how do they handle the jumping rules? That's a good question. Let me look at the guide and see what it says about jumping. The box set is so big. It's ridiculous how big this box is. Jumping glossary. The glossary is pretty cool. Like being able to just jump straight into the glossary. So when you make a long jump in this, here it is. Very interesting, right? They changed it. They changed the description. When you make a long jump in this set, you leap horizontally a number of feet equal to 5 times your strength modifier, minimum 5 feet. If you move at least 10 feet immediately before and after the jump, or before the jump. When you make a standing long jump, you can leap only half that distance. Either way, each foot you jump costs a foot of movement. If you land in difficult terrain, blah, 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 blah. This long jump assumes that the height of the jump doesn't matter, such as a jump across a stream or a chasm. So they specifically have the words in this set. So they rewrote the jump rule specifically for this set to account for the fact that there are no abilities. Because there's no need to have ability scores anymore. if you ask me. I certainly don't miss ability scores. So, but anyway, that was pretty interesting. It was also interesting that they did the same thing for a monster card. If you look at the monster card, they have that breakdown of the modifiers and the saves for monsters. I still like the Tales of the Valiant way, where you only have one score. You don't really need modifiers and saves. You just have a score. The score is the trained version of an ability, and that way you can use it for everything. I think that simplifies things, because if you look at this guy, look, it's all these numbers, but they're all the same, right? Turns out Carrion Crawler, strength mod, strength save, same thing. They're the same across the board. So the character card definitely is an interesting way to play the game. So the cards, there's one card per class. There are 4 classes in this box set: fighter, cleric, rogue, and wizard. Each class has 3 levels worth of material. So you can go to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd level. There's a card that has level 1 on one side, then you flip it over and you have level 2 on the other side, and then a second card for each class that has one of 2 subclasses. So you have some customization among classes. When they hit 3rd level, you can decide to be one type of cleric or another type of cleric. That is pretty interesting as well. By the time you get to like 4th level, then you're outside of the range of the box set. The box set basically says, like, here's how to level from one to the other, but there is no sort of expansion beyond 3rd level in the game. I mentioned that the game comes with monster and character tokens. The character tokens are standees. They have a little cross-cut thing that you can slide in there to stand up your tokens. There's about 8 of them, so you have some choice, but there's not a huge variety of the types of appearances and things like that you might have for your characters. They still look pretty cool. Michelle, who I played with, my wife Michelle, who played 2 characters, she had no trouble picking 2 of them out and saying, yeah, these 2 are the 2 characters I have. The monsters are all token-based. Really good artwork for the tokens. I really liked the art. And I think the tokens looked really cool. You can bag these up if you want. Like, once you've popped them out of the thing, you could put them in little baggies and store them in the tray. Or you could do what I did, which is I just stuck them back in the cardboard. I think I might stop doing that, because if you push them in and out too much, I think they'll peel. So I probably wouldn't do that. They reminded me a lot of the tokens that existed with the Monster Vault, which I liked. And there seems to be a good number of them. So you have a handful of bandits, you have a handful of cultists, you have a handful of sturges, skeletons, and things like that. There were a few different ones that you had that worked well, and some large size tokens as well. You can see in this picture the cross-cut standee, this sort of half circle that you would stick at the bottom of a character token. The monster cards are one area where I really felt like, wow, this is almost like a Beetle and Grimm-like set. There are 42 monster cards in here. There is a whole pile of monsters that range from basically like CR18 all the way up to like I think there's some CR3s, and there might be even like a CR4 or 5 in here. They have artwork on one side, so you can show the card to your players and say, like, here's what a monster looks like. And then the opposite side of the card has the basic stat block for that monster with challenge rating in the upper right, and then all the regular stuff. The cards look really good. They're tarot-sized cards, so they're like twice the size of a playing card, right? They're like, if you took 2 playing cards and put them side by side, that's about how big they are. Another interesting feature is they do not have static damage on these cards. That where the monsters in the monster manual have static damage, these have only dice rolling damage. So the expectation, I guess, is that you're going to roll dice, and they didn't want to have to explain static damage. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know why they didn't put static damage in there. I still prefer static damage, and there's some where you're rolling a fair bit of dice. You're rolling a fair bit of dice that you don't necessarily have in the box set, because it only has one of each kind of die. It has 4d6, 2d20, and then one of all the rest of the dice. So in here you have like 2d4. That means you got to roll twice. Low levels, you're really not rolling a ton of dice. It's not like you're doing the 24d4 Black Dragon acid breath, right, from the ancient Black Dragon. So you don't really have to worry about it. But it was an interesting thing that they kind of changed in the monsters, maybe to make it just a little bit more board gamey, like, hey, everyone's rolling dice all the time. What it did mean is my wife's character, she was playing a cleric, and as you can see, hit point maximum is 8, because the constitution is 0 for the cleric. She was not super pleased about playing a cleric with a 0 constitution, instead of like a +2 strength or a +2 charisma. She's like, I definitely would have moved that in there to get a couple extra hit points. And guess what? She was shot by a bandit and knocked from 8 hit points to 0 hit points in a single shot we were playing a duo game. She was running 2 characters. And so one of her characters was knocked out, and it was the cleric, which meant there was no good healing on the whole thing, which gets into my larger kind of thing about first level in 5th edition, which I've talked about ad nauseum and has been an issue with the starter for all of them pretty much, is first level is so deadly. right? It is so much more dangerous at first level than it is at any other level of the game. So think about this. The bandit, which I think is like a CR 1/8, right? So 1/8 the challenge rating roughly of the character, knocked the character out in one hit. Let's just pretend it was a CR 1/4. Imagine if a CR 5 monster did enough damage to knock a 20th level character out. That's the same ratio. Right? You're basically saying that a monster who's 1/4 the level of the characters should do enough damage to knock a character out, right? Why is that only happening at first level, right? And it means that first level feels very different than other levels. It's a minor complaint, but one of the things I would have done here is I would have put a lot more into con for these characters. And if you're going to start changing things, I don't know why you wouldn't say like these characters are blessed by the gods and they all have 5 extra hit points. I would make them a little bit meatier so that they're not going to get taken out by a single shot of a bandit, right? Like that's the way these things are, is, it's a single shot of the bandit. And yeah, Michael in chat says, where it's basically a hazing thing, right? The people that are like, oh, I think it should be like this. You're like, why isn't it like that the rest of the game? Well, it's different. Why? And are you really having a situation where you are basically going to filter out 50% of the players who are playing it because they wipe out and they're like, well, this game sucks. It's not balanced. And then they never play it again. And now they're out of the RPG industry because you had 8 hit points on your cleric and they got shot with a single one. So, one of them is like a first level. And I have this in all mine. First level should be its own tier. It should be treated like its own tier instead of being like, oh, first to fourth level is roughly the same. And you should make sure that you're never really facing creatures that are more than like CR 1/2. And even then, you really watch the damage. And I think you really have to watch the damage on this. So if I were offering a recommendation, if you're going to run this, be really careful. In fact, go ahead and they have little hit point tokens. Be like, everybody gets 5 extra hit points and give them an extra 5 hit point token. You don't even have to explain why. You just hand them the extra hit points. They start with 5 extra hit points and then they're a little bit meatier. I think that's something that we could do. So another interesting thing about character creation, which I thought was an interesting take, is there are character background cards. Right? The backgrounds have things like your backgrounds of guard or farmer or whatever, and they have the feat on the card. They don't describe them as a feat. You just have a feature of the background that includes that specific feat. And they do not have ability modifiers on the backgrounds, which means they're technically using the custom background rules for the starter set, right? I think that should have been the default, right? I think the default for D&D 2024 should be custom backgrounds, that you choose a background, you pick what feat you want, and you pick your ability score modifiers. And the ability score modifier should be part of the ability score process instead of being a separate thing that's tied to background, which, in my mind is probably one of the biggest problems with D&D 2024. That idea of tying ability scores and feats to backgrounds means you're only going to kind of min-max exactly which background you're going to pick. This one I think works well, but I just think it's interesting. That's sort of like breaking the defaults of using ability scores. The idea of separating your ability scores from your background, because now they're built onto the card, you don't have to do it, makes more sense for the game overall. So it's kind of funny that wasn't the default for the game overall. So here's the other sheet. I think there were 2 sheets, maybe 3 sheets. I think there's 3 sheets of tokens. One that have the characters plus some environmental effects, one that has small and large monsters, and the one that's focused on small monsters. But you can see all the different monsters here. One of the neat things is I think that you could really take the material that's in this box and continue to expand it quite a bit. You could really use the material in here quite a bit beyond even the scenarios that it's got in the game itself. And let's talk about those scenarios. So there are 3 books of scenarios. There is the Wilderness book, which focuses on kind of overland travel. There's the Keep on the Borderlands, which is the main settlement. And there's the Caves of Chaos. The artwork on those books is fantastic. And each of those have a whole bunch of different scenarios, a whole bunch of different locations that you can explore. The Wilderness, as you imagine, has wilderness challenges. Caves of Chaos is kind of the bulk of where the adventures are taking place. And it has, I think about 11 different locations that you can go to in the Caves of Chaos. And then there's the Keep of the Borderlands itself, which has a settlement, and each location in the keep has its own little adventure hook. So here's an example, like the trader's shop, right? And the trader's shop has different things that are going on there. But then there's a quest of a dangerous stowaway. As the characters browse her wares, she offers them a gold piece to unload a wagon while her sons are off watching soldiers train elsewhere. Unknown, the shipment contains a dangerous stowaway. During transit, a nasty ooze slithers onto the wagon and gobbled up its driver. Oozes usually lurk in dark places. The ooze surprise. You find the wagon, and so you get attacked by a gray ooze. So there's little fun encounters that take place in the city itself. And every one of the locations that's in the city has a hook like that. So there are 4 locations in the Wilderness Guide, 4 different places that you can visit. When you look at the overland map, you can kind of pick them. Those 4 include the trail, the woods, the fens, and the Tamarack Stand. And then each of those kind of has different encounters. So the trail, for example, is actually broken out into separate encounters. There's the looted wagon, the talkative traveler, the game trail, and the bandit ambush. The bandit ambush kind of being the main combat piece of that. So each of them sort of has, the woods, for example, has the hermit's hut, the occult ritual, the sacred spring going on there. So sort of, and the sparring sprites. So there's kind of different encounters set up for each of the wilderness and exploration pieces. The caves themselves are a little tight from what I saw. I have not run the caves, but the caves seem to have kind of more of a focused, hey, here's the map, here's the dungeon, and here are each of the locations of what's going on in each of these places that are going on. So now I'll talk about the one thing that really got my attention on kind of the negative side, where I was like, I don't know how this exactly works. There are very few quest hooks. Right? There are sort of like specific encounter things that happen in different places, but there's no overarching sort of quest hook mechanism. How do the players know where to go? Who's asking, why are they going to any of these places? When you go to the wilderness, it literally says, ask them where they want to go. It doesn't give any direction on why they'd want to go from any one place to another. There's nothing to say like, well, which one of the caves of chaos do you want to visit first? Right? It actually describes in the Caves of Chaos book. So there's all of these different caves. But one of the tricky bits of the Caves of Chaos is they're built for different levels, right? They have different levels. And in fact, there's a map in here that says like Cave K is for level 3, Cave D is for level 1, Cave E is for level 2. So it's not super clear. Like if you go to the second level cave at level 1, you're going to get wiped out. And you could argue like, well, that kind of makes it so some things are more dangerous than others. And I get it. But if there's no description about why you would want to go to any one cave over another, that's not a choice. They're not making a choice to go to like one that was more dangerous than another, because they can go to any of the caves. The point is you kind of want to steer them. And it even says like, if you're new to the game, make sure to steer them towards Cave A, right? Cave A functions as a tutorial with helpful sidebars. If this is your first time as the DM, encourage the players to start there. Otherwise, have them choose a cave on the shown map. But they could definitely pick up the wrong cave. Right? Like they could pick up the wrong cave. So there's a couple of that. I think that brings up a couple of things. One of them is like not having any kind of quest structure. And I'm not even looking for like an overarching story, right? I did see EN World, Christian Hoffer over on EN World wrote a really good preview where he talked about everything in here too. And he brought up the fact that there is no larger storyline going here like there is with Lost Mine of Phandelver or Dragon of Icespire Peak or Dragon of Stormwreck Isle, right? There's no like overarching story. Instead, everything is kind of independent. I'm not so sure that that's bad. I don't know that there needs to be an overarching story for a game like this, but I am surprised that there isn't any sort of quest hook of like you talk to a guy, the guy says, hey, this place went, these guys went missing in this place. I'd like you to go find out. Or, it's very bizarre to not have any kind of hook to kind of draw the characters there. And it's possible. And they tested this thing thoroughly. They apparently tested it with board gamers. So I'm not saying like, oh, this is a flaw in the product and nobody's going to be able to play it. I'm sure everybody's been playing it fine. I know I've heard many, many people playing this at conventions and having a fine time with it. So I'm not saying like, oh, it's broken. But as a customer, just as a guy who bought a product and opens it up and is kind of reading and wants to play it, one of the things that I found that for me is kind of missing is a motivation for the characters to go on these adventures, right? Why would they do it? And this is kind of a difference between sort of the classic style of D&D of yore, where the character and the player were really separate entities. You didn't really role play your character. Because a lot of times if you were role playing your character, you'd never go on these adventures because you're going to get killed. These are super dangerous, right? You get shot by a bandit and you're dead. So you're like, I'm going to stay and live with my family and become a farmer like my old man, right? and especially if you're like, wow, I found 5 gold. That's really good. I'm quitting, right? Like I've got enough money to quit. So when they start to role play the character, if you don't have a hook, if you don't have a reason to go there, that's kind of a problem. Now, there is kind of a hook in I asked around. I asked some friends of mine. My friend Teo Sabadia got a preview copy as well. He did a couple of really good videos that you should check out that he did on YouTube. And he brought up, actually, there is kind of a thing. It's in the back of the Keep in the Borderlands book. And I went and looked at that. And there's sort of 3 people that you can meet. There's Dwin the Scribe, Alondra the Advisor, and Winvarl the Castilian. And each of them can send you to the wilderness, or go do odd jobs around town, or go to the Caves of Chaos. But the quest is essentially, we'd like you to go to the Caves of Chaos, right? So there is kind of a little bit of a story. So your arrival is fortuitous. I heard whispers of a nefarious cult, the self-proclaimed cult of chaos that reportedly operates in a cave network in the Northeast. I believe the source of the cult's power resides in one of those caves. Those lands yearn for heroes. For the good of the Borderlands and the people under my charge, I humbly ask you to investigate these rumors, and if need be, quell this evil. So that's kind of a quest, but it's also the last page of the book, right? Like it's like, I was reading it quickly and I was like, oh, that's the last thing. It's also, the quest is go and do the Caves of Chaos. Wasn't real specific about which caves. And again, you pick the wrong cave and you're going to die. Now, an argument that, hey, Mike Shea, you don't know what you're talking about, and that's not a problem, is this is actually kind of like a West Marches game. We're all excited about West Marches games now that we learned that Critical Role is going to be doing a West Marches style game. And if you were not familiar with the West Marches style game, a West Marches style game is sort of a RPG game style where the players are heavily driving the direction of where the game is going, more so than the GM. The players actually bring themselves together. They choose which players are going. They choose the quest that they want to go on. They tell it to the game master, who then builds out the adventure based on where they want to go, what they want to explore, and who they're bringing. And they even schedule the game and everything like that. That's sort of how, and generally in a West Marches game, you have a bigger pool of players and several GMs. Right? Not just one GM. You have several GMs and lots of players, and the players are forming groups and doing scheduling with a particular GM to go to a certain place. This isn't exactly like that because you still have one GM and a set of players, but it's very open in the idea that the players are driving the direction that they want to go. So maybe it's not a problem, right? Maybe the answer is this is kind of a fun, go explore. Your role as adventurers is to go into these places, but there has to be sort of an underlying rule and understanding of the players and the game master that your job is to go to these places. Your job is not to quit and go become a farmer. So that was just something that I found interesting because it has a ripe opportunity, had the opportunity for something like the 3-2-1 quest model from Dragon of Icespire Peak, which I thought was a really good way. I mean, I've talked about it a lot. I've wrote articles about it. I've discussed it on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I use it in my own books. This idea of like, hey, here are 3 quests that you can go on. You go to a job board. There are 3 quests on the job board to go explore certain things. They give you motivation to go. They tell you what the reward is. You go on 2 of them, and then one of them is thrown out, and then you get 3 new quests. There was an opportunity to do that here, and they didn't do it. Is it a mistake? I don't know. I mean, again, I would have enjoyed it, so I can't speak for everybody, but I think having a stronger motivation, particularly we could have quest cards, right? You had the cards in here. You could have quest cards. And the quest card could say, here are the 3 quests that you're going on, and you could pick one of those and go on, and you could pick the other one and go on it. And now there's motivation to go. Now there's a clear direction, and you can kind of steer them away from the super deadly places. So they're not killed at first level. Now they hate D&D, and they hate role-playing games, and they're never going to touch them again. And instead go to places that are more suited for, again, your first level characters. I think you could get away with second and third level characters at a lot of the locations, but first level characters are just going to get wiped out. So that was probably the main sort of detriment that I found. So the D&D starter set is really good. Is it too good? One of the thoughts I had is this building a false expectation of what role-playing games in general are going to be like? Because this only goes to 3rd level, and then you're on your own. And when you're on your own, now you don't have all of the character tokens, you don't have the fancy handouts, you don't have the super easy character cards, you don't have the fancy battle maps, you don't have any of that stuff. You're back to the old way of getting out your ancient Chessex mat with all of the old stuff still buried into it, of writing things on index cards and handing them out to players at best, or just telling them their things are going on. Character creation is significantly more complicated when you get away from the card style that we have here. So is this kind of building a situation where you get a taste of role-playing, but you don't really understand what role-playing games are like, or basically from the GM and the player perspective, the limitations of what role-playing games are like and the kind of stuff you're going to have to bring to the table, because you're not going to have this Beetle and Grimm level quality for the whole rest of your adventures. There isn't a advanced set, right? There isn't an expert set that then takes you from 3rd to 5th level. Be kind of cool if there was. Like, what if they had a 4th level, the 3rd and 4th level, or 4th and 5th level expansion for this? And then what if they went on? I mean, now you got a whole different kind of game, right? That would be pretty cool, but I don't think we're going to see that. I wouldn't expect that we're going to see that, because then you're limiting, every time you put out a new product that goes onto this one, you're limited by the people who only have the previous one. So you're cutting out the number of people that are going to get each future product. But the reality is, like, the quality of the stuff that's in here is really, really good, but doesn't match the quality of the materials that you're typically going to be able to bring to your game once you graduate from this and into running regular role-playing games. Is that a problem? I have no idea. I'm not speculating that, that's going to be the end of the RPG industry as we know it. I wouldn't really say anything like that. But it did bring that question up to me of, are we building a false expectation of what RPG is? Wizards, and I'm not doing it, I didn't make this thing, is Wizards of the Coast building a false expectation of what RPGs are like with the high quality of the materials that they have in here? That is sort of like a backhanded negative thing, because what I'm saying is this is so good that it's making the rest of the RPG industry look bad, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I don't really know, but it is a question that I have in mind. I don't know that we'd ever be able to know what that even looks like, though. I don't know, unless we see like a swarm of Reddit posts from people saying like, hey, I played the starter set and I loved it, but now my players are totally lost as far as how to make their characters, and I have no idea how to run these other adventures because they don't include tokens, they don't include monster cards, they don't include maps, they don't include all the handouts, all the stuff that I expected. And everyone's like, well, you could buy a Beetle and Grimm set, it's only $500, right? Like, I don't know what that is going to be like. Well, we'll have to see. I wouldn't expect we're going to hear much from it, and I actually would not expect that it is much of a problem. Yeah, Walt APR calls this the starter set effect, kind of mirroring the Mercer effect. Are we building an expectation that's too high that people aren't going to be able to meet once you actually get back down to running the game itself? So, I really like the D&D starter set. I think it looks really good. I think the value that you get for the money that you spend is very, very high. I think this would be really fun for both veteran GMs and for new GMs. I think from what I have heard from lots of people that have been playing it, they really enjoyed it. New players enjoyed running it. I think it is an excellent box set. It is certainly the most robust D&D starter set I have ever had my hands on. And I look forward to playing through it. There's a lot of material to play through, 15 scenarios that you can play through. So lots and lots of hours of fun that you can have in this box. And I think if my worst criticism is that it might be building too good of an expectation of what role-playing games are like, that's a pretty good compliment in the end. So I definitely recommend it. I am looking forward to running it more, and I hope to do future videos where I can dive in and offer specific guidance and specific tips for running the scenarios that are inside the D&D starter set. Friends, if you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You can find a link down in the show notes. You get weekly RPG-related articles sent directly to your inbox, along with links to all of the other work that I do. You also get a free adventure generator PDF that can help you build adventures with the material that you get in the D&D starter set. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of tips, tricks, tools, things to help you run your role-playing games, further advice, a whole separate podcast, and an awesome community over on our Discord server. And you can pick up any of my books to help you run your games, such as Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, The Lazy DM's Companion, Forge of Foes, and more, all available at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Links for those are in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.